When we talk about the Zodiac Killer, we often think about his cryptic letters, his mocking phone calls, and the mystery of his identity. But in chasing the enigma, we sometimes forget the people who mattered most, his victims. These were real people, sons, daughters, friends, and lovers. They had hopes, dreams, families waiting for them at home. Some never returned. Others survived, but their lives were never the same. Today, we remember them, not as statistics in a true crime story, but as human beings whose lives were stolen or shattered by one man's cruelty. The first victims, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. December 20th, 1968. It was the Friday before Christmas break in Vallejo, California. 17-year-old David Faraday had just picked up his girlfriend, 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen. They were young, full of life, and still at the tender beginnings of their relationship. That night was supposed to be special. It was their very first official date. They went to a Christmas concert at Hogan High School, then stopped by a friend's house. Betty Lou, with her long brown hair and bright smile, had told her family she'd be home by 11. She was a responsible girl, a dreamer, someone who loved her friends and had her whole future ahead of her. David, a quiet but kind teenager, was the eldest of 5 children. He wanted to study science. He had a younger brother who looked up to him and parents who trusted him. But that night, instead of going home, the young couple drove to a quiet lover's lane on Lake Herman Road, a place where teenagers went to talk, laugh, and steal private moments. They never made it home. Around 11:15 p.m., another driver found David slumped beside his mother's Rambler station wagon. He had been shot in the head. Betty Lou lay face down, several feet away, her bright red dress stained dark. She had tried to run. She had been shot 5 times in the back. In an instant, 2 families' lives were shattered. A boy and a girl with first date jitters, holiday excitement, and teenage dreams had been silenced forever. They weren't supposed to be the beginning of a serial killer's story. They were supposed to be the beginning of their own. The next victims, Darlene Ferrin and Mike Mageau. July 4th, 1969. While fireworks lit up the California night sky, 2 young people were looking for a quiet moment away from the crowds. Darlene Elizabeth Ferrin was just 22 years old. She was a free-spirited, kind-hearted waitress, known for her bubbly personality and warm smile. Everyone who knew her said she was the type of person who could light up a room the second she walked in. Darlene was also a devoted mother to a young daughter. She balanced her responsibilities with a playful, adventurous spirit. To her friends, she was simply Dee, someone you could count on for laughter, love, and loyalty. That night, she drove her friend, 19-year-old Mike Mageau, to a secluded spot at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo. Mike was quiet, shy, and a little self-conscious. He looked up to Darlene, who was older and far more outgoing. For him, it was just supposed to be a fun hangout on a holiday evening. But instead of fireworks, they found horror. A car pulled up beside them, then drove away, only to return minutes later. The driver stepped out, holding a flashlight and what looked like a gun. At first, Mike thought it was a police officer. But within seconds, gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through the car windows. Mike was shot in the face, neck, and chest. He fell across the seat, bleeding but conscious. Darlene was hit multiple times. She screamed in agony, trapped in the driver's seat, as the shooter turned away, then came back to fire again. Minutes later, a passerby found the 2 bleeding in the car. Mike, gravely injured, survived. He was rushed to the hospital, where he gave one of the first descriptions of the killer. But survival did not mean escape. For the rest of his life, Mike carried the physical scars and the unbearable weight of that night. He never forgot the sound of Darlene's screams. Darlene wasn't as lucky. She died before reaching the hospital. Her family, friends, and young daughter were left behind, her laughter silenced, her future stolen. She was only 22, a young mother who should have grown old, seen her daughter grow up, and lived a full life. Instead, she became another name in the Zodiac's trail of blood. The third victims, Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell. September 27, 1969. It was a warm Saturday afternoon at Lake Berryessa, a popular spot for couples, students, and families to enjoy nature. Cecilia and Shepard, just 22 years old, was a college student at the University of California, Riverside. She was intelligent, compassionate, and deeply loved by her family and friends. Cecilia was the kind of person who listened with her whole heart, someone who made people feel valued. She had her whole future ahead of her, filled with dreams of love, family, and career. That day, she went to the lake with her friend Brian Hartnell, 20 years old, a law student with a sharp mind and a warm personality. Brian was preparing for a life in law, full of ambition and hope. The two weren't romantically involved. They were just good friends sharing a relaxing day by the water. But their quiet afternoon was shattered. As they lounged on a blanket, a man appeared. He wore a bizarre hooded costume, emblazoned with a white cross circle symbol, the Zodiac's mark. He carried a gun and long lengths of rope. At first, Brian thought it was a robbery. The man claimed he was an escaped convict and needed money and a car. But within moments, it became clear this was far darker. He tied Brian and Cecilia's hands, then stabbed them, over and over. Brian was stabbed 6 times. Cecilia, 10. Brian, in agonizing pain, survived by playing dead. But Cecilia's injuries were too severe. She clung to life for 2 days in the hospital, long enough to describe the attack to police, before tragically passing away. The cruelty of that moment is hard to put into words. Cecilia's final hours were spent not at home, not in the arms of her loved ones, but in a hospital bed, her body broken by senseless violence. She never got the chance to graduate, to chase her dreams, or to grow old. Brian survived, but like Mike Mageau before him, survival meant a lifetime of scars. He lived with the memory of lying helpless on that blanket, hearing his friends' cries, and realizing there was nothing he could do. Cecilia was 22. Brian was 20. 2 young lives at the edge of possibility, one stolen forever, the other scarred beyond repair. And all for nothing but the twisted pleasure of a faceless killer. The last confirmed victim, Paul Stine, October 11, 1969, San Francisco. Paul Lee Stine was 29 years old, a husband, a brother, a son. He wasn't out on a date. He wasn't at a lover's lane. He wasn't taking a walk near the water. He was simply working, driving his taxi cab through the city streets. Paul wasn't a headline. He was a man just like so many others, working long hours to make ends meet, to provide for his family. He had people waiting for him at home that night, expecting him to walk through the door, but he never came back. Around 9:55 p.m., Paul picked up a fare at the corner of Mason and Geary Streets. His cab headed toward Presidio Heights, a quiet, affluent neighborhood. Minutes later, the nightmare unfolded. The passenger pulled a gun and shot Paul in the head at point-blank range. He died instantly. The killer then did something chilling. He leaned over, cut off a piece of Paul's shirt, and later mailed it to the San Francisco Chronicle as proof that it was him. It was senseless. Paul wasn't targeted because of who he was. He wasn't involved in any feud or hidden drama. He was chosen simply because the Zodiac wanted to kill again. The cruelest part? Several witnesses, including children, saw the killer leaving the scene. Police even stopped a man nearby who matched the suspect's description, but they let him go because a mistaken radio call said they were looking for a black suspect, not a white man. Paul's death is often overshadowed when people talk about the Zodiac, but behind the gruesome details and the infamous shirt scrap was a human being, a man with family, with friends, with a life that mattered. He wasn't just the cab driver victim. He was Paul. He deserved to grow older, to see another sunrise, to come home after his shift and kiss his loved ones goodnight. Instead, his life ended alone, in the back of his cab, at the hands of a killer who craved attention more than human compassion. Paul Lee Stine was 29, and his family never got the goodbye they deserved. These were the lives touched and taken by the Zodiac Killer. Too often, the headlines focus on the mystery of the murderer, the taunting letters, the cryptic ciphers, the shadowy figure who slipped away into the night. But behind every crime scene were real people. Sons, daughters, friends, and lovers. People with dreams, families who loved them, futures that were stolen in the most brutal way. Some survived to tell their story. Others never got the chance to say goodbye. The Zodiac wanted fame. He wanted to be remembered. But today, let's remember the victims instead. Which of these stories touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments, because the more we speak their names, the harder it is for them to be forgotten. And if you want to keep honoring their memories and hear more stories like this, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Together, we can make sure the world remembers the people behind the headlines, not just the monster who tried to erase them.